Hello, my friends. Um, so I am here with one of my favorite decks right now. This is the Marshmallow Marseille, and it has weirdly become my most used deck. I mean, not weirdly, it's a great deck. It's just small, and so I throw it in my backpack. But also when I do readings for people, which I did more this summer than normally I usually do, this was the one that people kept choosing, which I thought was interesting because it's people who don't know about tarot are usually, excuse me, usually drawn more to the pictures. And as a Marseille deck, it's not. I've been reading mostly with them anyway, Marseille decks, and I don't I don't usually give people a choice, but this time I did. So, anyway, what I wanted to talk about was if you do follow my videos, you'll know that I've talked in the past about how I really don't read reversals. I did when I started, and it was sort of when I was learning back, 1998, 1999, in the community that I had access to, which was an online community, kind of in the early days of that. You sort of it was like a thing of pride. You know what I mean? If you didn't read reversals, you were going to have to sort of learn at some point because you weren't really doing it right. Was the unstated subtext of things. And so I read them and I used them, and over time I actually found like I didn't need them as much. With the decks I was using, with Rider Waite Smith systems, which is primarily what I was using for most of my life as a reader. I was able to kind of get a sense of light and shadow without needing reversals. But what I have found as I've been exploring Marseille-style decks, and pip decks in general, is that I can get some additional info by using reversals. Um, and it sort of just happened by following an impulse. I think it's Yoav Bendov in his book that says, nothing in a reading is accident. There's no accident in a reading. Everything is kind of meaningful. And so when I'm doing a reading and I get an impulse, I usually follow it because I feel like that's important to the reading. And I started more and more when I was reading with Marseille decks. This is my most used, but also the Jean Noblet is probably the other one that I carry around with me, again because it's small and I really love it. My third favorite of this year is the Corte dei Tarocchi, which I'm giving away right now. If you haven't seen, I have a copy to give away. It's unopened. Check out my video on reverse tarot troll, hashtag reverse tarot troll. Anyway, that deck is kind of impractical to carry around because it's sort of an it's like the box is really, Il Meneghello gorgeousness, and I don't want to ruin it, even though I have two. So I'm trying to think of a way I can carry it around with me. But anyway, blah blah blah. Following the impulse is the important salient point. This is why my videos are so long, because I ramble. And so I have found that by doing that, by following that impulse, I was actually getting a little bit more information in the reading about whether energy was sort of in its shadow or light aspect, without an image on the card to sort of contextual, the images around the card to kind of contextualize it. It wasn't that I felt like I was doing bad readings with the without using reversals, and in fact reversals are not really super common in my reading on Marseille in particular. But also what is common to Marseille is only using the majors, for example, which of course I don't do. So I'm always looking for ways I can make my readings more practical, clearer, more specific, more useful. This has been the journey I started talking about late last year. This whole year has really been about that journey. One of the ways I found doing that was actually using Marseille. But doing it with reversals, using reversals with Marseille has been interesting. I don't know if you can see this, but most Marseille decks have a certain symmetry to them, which makes it kind of difficult to tell reversals. And so what I did with two of my most used decks was I took a Sharpie. Can you see that? Kind of. And I made a little dot on the bottom right corner of all of the pip cards. You can see there's one up there. So I know, I mean, you can see with the number too, but it's a little less obvious. So I needed to give myself a consistent clue to look for. I didn't do it to the majors or the chords, but just to sort of know, here's a little dot that tells me that dot should be in the lower right, so when it's in the upper left, then it's reversed. Cups are easy to tell, but not every suit is. So I just did that for all of them, all of the pips, so that I could, have a consistent cue. Now, it doesn't necessarily change. I'm going to sort of I'm going to lay a spread and sort of talk about how I would use them. I have a tendency to be kind of rough with this deck, which maybe isn't nice, but it seems to respond. This deck likes it rough. Funny for a Marseille deck, for a Marseille deck called the Marshmallow Marseille. It doesn't necessarily change the numerological associations that I have with them, but it deepens the color for me. It might tell me that this is, if it's reversed, then it's if it's a card number with traditionally positive, like 6 is traditionally like beauty, balance, the unification of growth, thinking of 3 plus 3. But if it's reversed, then there's a problem there. There's something that's less beautiful than it could be, or something maybe a little ugly. So what I've been doing is literally just this thing of kind of messing, around with the cards on the table, and just, and it's not an uncommon thing. It's not something I usually like to do because it is kind of messy, but I find that even when I used reversals in the older days of my reading, it felt like I knew I was reversing half the deck, because I would just take a chunk and reverse it, or like it didn't seem like, oh, there's too many or there's not enough or whatnot. So this seemed like a solution to that, and actually people who I read for when I do read in person feel less intimidated than doing a shuffle like that. So let me see. So I'm just going to draw, let me zoom out. I'm just going to draw 9 as I do. That's my go-to. And I'll just talk about how the color, the reversals color the reading for me. And interesting, like I'm sort of not doing it with, I'm reading almost exclusively with Marseille decks at the moment, but when I don't use them, like I use the idiosyncratic a little bit this summer. When I use that deck, I don't particularly use reversals. Excuse me. How are we doing with the light? I'm trying to light videos better, and it's good and not good at the same time. So it tends to, anyway, that's not the point. All right, so again, this is my favorite spread at the moment that I use just generally. And I start with the middle card. I honestly think I got this from Lenormand. But, it's pretty common. I start with the middle card and I look at the first card, and that gives me the theme of the reading. Then I look at all 3 rows and all 3 columns and sort of try to find support or elaboration for my initial, what I call thesis of the reading. So in this case, the reversed cards, I have the 4 of coins is reversed, and the 3 of coins is reversed, and the 4 of wands and the 3 of wands are upright. And then you can see all of the court cards except for the Knight of Cups is reversed. But I'm focusing more kind of on the pips here, but I'll kind of talk all about all of it. So, right out of the gate, what I think is really interesting is that I have 2 pips reversed and 2 upright surrounding the central card. So sorry, I'm just trying to think of the best way to talk about this. So let me just talk about that first thing I was talking about. So the 2 coins are reversed. The 2 wands are upright. So the reversal of the coins says maybe I have to pay attention to money here. Like there may be money problems, or there may be like this is a thing that they're not thinking about that they should be. And I can think about that as I go through the reading as a whole. The upright one suggests, they're sort of creative, their passions are really sort of cooking, their fire's really fiery, but they're maybe not as interested in the practical things right now. So that's something that's interesting. And then just to sort of talk about the meaning of the card inverted depends on, again, the context of the others. So the 4 of coins would be sort of financial stability, financial balance, having like a good financial foundation to sit on. But the reversal suggests that maybe that foundation's a little shaky, or there's like a financial conservatism that's getting in the way of progress. The three of coins reversed suggests, the three of coins is about growth, about sort of the seeds growing into a plant, the flowering of resources. But again, reversed, something isn't right there, so the growth could be blocked, or or conversely, it could be growing too wild. So again, I sort of look for the other cards to tell me about what the reversals suggest. But the ultimate numerological meaning isn't changed. Like 4 is still structure, it's still balance, it's still conservatism. 3 is still growth, it's still 2 becoming 1, it's still triangulation, but it becomes about where the energy is focused in the context of the reading. So I'm just going to interpret the reading and kind of talk through my mental process as I go through, so you can kind of see where I'm coming from, and how I'm using reversals as a suggestion, or as like shading in a picture. The color is still blue, but it's shading the hue of the color. Do you know what I mean? So the card still means what it means, but it's adding shading to the reading. Okay, so we start with the Ace of Swords there in the middle, which suggests new ideas, like the seeds of some learning, some growth, some maybe communication that's sort of coming in, partnered with the 4 of coins reversed in the upper left corner. So there's an interesting pairing, because I have something really seemingly nice, which is this breakthrough, this thought breakthrough. But then I've got this sort of practical reversion of sort of conservatism. So what this suggests to me right out of the gate is like there's some new idea that's being blocked by kind of resting on old values. And I'm taking values to represent money in this case, because it doesn't seem to be financial. If there were a coin in the middle, it would seem to be like about job or finances, but the sword says we're talking about communication, we're talking about learning, and we're talking about sort of more cerebral things. So I'm using value rather than money as sort of a metaphorical thing, because I know that the 4 can represent conservatism, ... values. So there's like a new way of thinking, but some conservative value, and I don't mean that in like a political sense, but something I value that I think is important, that I think I'm resting on, is actually a sign of my own unwillingness to progress, and it's blocking the full measure, the full potential of that Ace of Swords. So there's a big lesson out there, but my clinging to some foundation, some life view that I have, some value that I have, is getting in the way. If the 4 of coins were upright, I would say that new idea would rest on the foundation of life that I've built so far. You know what I mean? So in this case, the reversal suggests that it's blocking this. An upright would suggest that the new breakthrough was resting on a solid foundation of values. So the reversal in this case gives me more the shadow aspect of the 4. It still means the same thing. It still means foundation, stability, conservatism, but in this case, it's a shadow aspect. Those of us politically who think of the word conservative as a political, sometimes think of it as a negative. But conservatism, in life, separated from politics, is good if you're trying to conserve money, if you're trying to conserve water. You know what I mean? So we have to think about the light and shadow of the keywords that we give the numerology if we're using pips. So now I read each of the 3 rows and then each of the 3 columns. So in the top row, again, we've already talked about the 4 of coins reversed. We've got the 4 of wands, and then we've got the page of swords reversed. So the page of swords validates my initial impulse that this is blocking this, because the reversed page would suggest to me a student, and it's a page of swords. So I talked about this being a lesson, a new lesson. Pages learn lessons, and sword. So the page is sort of the student of students. But the reversal here suggests, again, blockage. So I now have this interesting triangulation here. So again, I start with this conservative, this sort of these values, this value, this foundation I've given myself is blocking a lesson I need to learn. It's really blocking me from learning something. What's maybe in the way? Because if I just look sort of, if I look at just the flow, the blockage starts the row. I'm not learning here. I'm sort of, my learning is slowed. There's another foundation, so we have another 4. So there's a stability. This is an upright one. So this is technically the light aspect of the card. But now as a reader, I have a problem to solve, right? Because I'm thinking this is blocking this. This row starts here, and these two are really well connected because this combo is validated by this card. And if you look back on my video about evidence, one of the things that we're actually trying to do, I think, as readers, and I got this from Camelia Elias's writing, is to find evidence for what our initial thesis is in the reading. So my thesis was some value, life values I have are blocking a lesson. I know that the lesson is being blocked. This combination is validated by this card. I apologize if I'm repeating. I'm just trying to I'm working through this in real time. So I have this really good thing, which is an upright 4, which is about balance, stability, stability, conservatism, foundation. I'm looking at the light aspect of that. We have wands, which is fire, which is creativity, passion, vocation. So what's interesting is that this good thing, in quotes, is contributing to this blockage. Another piece of evidence that I find in that a set of values or a foundation is important to this process or important to the overall message of the reading is because this is another 4. So these are both 4s. They both mean the same thing in a sense. Stability, foundation, conservatism, but in relationship to their element and in relationship to their being upright or reversed. So if I were interpreting this card alone, I would say that your creative work is resting on a foundation of really stable passion, of really stable enthusiasm for what you do. The things that you've done so far in your work have really grounded you, and you're really sort of resting on a strong standpoint. But that's actually getting in the way. And so what I would say is in this row, this is probably the value, your life value, that's blocking this. So though this looks good, it's something that feels good, it's actually one of the sources, it's one of the values that's blocking this new lesson. So the foundation that I've built for myself in my work, for example, and this isn't a real reading, and I'm using I as an editorial I there, but the things that I'm passionate about, the foundation that I've built of things that I really care about and that I really want to do, is actually the thing that's stopping me from growing. My feeling that I know the right thing to do and that I'm doing my work the way I'm supposed to be is actually stopping me from this lesson. So here's an example of where, even though this is the light aspect of the card, it's something that's good is actually, in a sense, blocking me. And it could be too much of a good thing, etc. But now I go to the next row to see what this says. So I get the 3 of Wands, interesting. We already know the Ace, and then we have the King of Coins reversed. So again, when I see a court card reversed, what I'm thinking of in terms of the court card is sort of stumped development, in a sense, because I think of the court as a progression of development. So with the page we have the student, with the knight we have the person who's going out there and finding it. With the queen we have sort of the person who embodies, who masters that art, and then the king is sort of the leader of others. He's like the CEO, the mentor, the kind of grand poobah of that thing. So, but again, we have kind of, I keep wanting to reach for the word retarded in the literal sense, not in the politically charged sense. We have slowed development. We have a whole column of that, actually, because the emperor at the bottom row is also sort of a person who's a court-like person upside down. So there's an interesting thing to consider. But anyway, we're looking at this row. So we've got this creative growth and we've got new ideas, but we've got kind of a stubbornness to look again, coin. So there's some sort of value that I'm being really stubborn about. So I could be growing some new creative, because 3 is growth, right? Some new creative growth could be yielding like a complete total breakthrough for me, a new lesson. But some stubborn sort of, I know what I'm doing, I know how to do this, is getting in the way. So here's another blockage. So block. How do I know that? It, it's into, I mean, that's to me where intuition comes in, this is light, this is reversed, so it's shadow, so it's stumped. This is also stumped, and I know that it's stumped by the thing that's in front of it. This is stumping itself because I'm looking in the context of the row. Good, stumped. And I'm also tying it into this. So this is stumped in a way, and it's another coin. So in a weird way, it's like playing a game of memory or matching. I could match this here too. I'm being conservative and it's stopping me from growing. So that row, again, kind of validates the row above it, which is helpful. Again, I have another 3. And again, I have a reversed coin. All the coins in this reading are reversed, so patterns are important. I have another 3 tied to here, so 4 and 4, 3 and 3, and it's reversed. So I've got stunted growth. I've got stunted growth in a row that includes the Knight of Cups and the Emperor. The Knight of Cups is an interesting person here because he's running towards the stunted growth. And the Knight of Cups is an interesting character in the tarot to me because he's about as dreamy as the tarot court gets. And he's wholly impractical, and he's so motivated by his feelings and his love and his sort of romantic view. And his romanticism is actually running towards this lack of growth, which points me back up here to the stunted growth that I keep talking about. And he's running to it. So even though the Knight of Cups is upright, contextually, he's his romantic, dreamy self. His romance isn't stunted. His romantic view of the world isn't blocked. It's not a negative, but it's forcing him to run towards like regressive growth. So he has this dreamy, the querent for this reading has a dreamy sense of the world based on this combination up here that's stopping growth. And then I get to the final card in the row, which is the Emperor reversed. And this, to me, again, is like just complete and total stubbornness. So the Emperor upright is a ruler, and he thrives in confinements. He's by the book. But that by the book quality here is inverted, which again is another justification for the overall message of the reading, which is the stunted development thanks to boundaries, to conservative boundaries that are self-imposed by our own values, what we view the world to be. So the last card, all of this sort of confirms the overall message, which is nice. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes it negates it or sometimes it expands on it, but this is a nice example. And it's not even about reading the spread that we're talking about. I'm just trying to sort of work through, to show you how I'm letting reversals color Marseille readings or pip readings. And so in this case, I kind of have my overall message, which is like, if this were a current, my job at this point would be to say, so there's some breakthrough that's waiting to happen that's going to like unlock your mind, but your impression of the way things are supposed to work and the way things are supposed to be done and the way that you do them being the right way is actually stopping you from learning something new. So the question for the current now becomes like, what are those values? And they have to work that out. The suits can kind of help. I can go on and I can look at the columns to justify this more. If this were a real reading, I wouldn't necessarily need to do that because every row in this reading seemed to validate my initial thesis. But it's still interesting because I can always find more information. What I do know about this person is that they probably do something for a living, coins, that they're very passionate about wands. So I could say that this is a person who is in a job, and they could be getting a promotion, they could be learning something new that'll take them to a new level, but their conservatism about how they do what they do is holding them back. Again, you don't really know unless you have information. This actually came up in the live chat this morning with Kelly, that the amount of specific Aquarian is willing to be dictates the amount of specific that you as a reader can be. My sense that what they do for a living is something they're passionate about comes from the strong combination of coins, which is living, and wands, which is passion. But I don't know. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't really know unless they were here to validate that. So if I look at the, just, you can stop here if you want. You may get my point. But if you want to keep hearing how I would, interpret the columns, I've done other videos on this spread. But I find this spread immensely useful. And it's been adapted from other folks. But it really just, like, this 9-card, what Camellia Elias calls a carré, a 9-card spread. It's really, right out of Lenormand, but super useful with tarot, I find, regardless of the kind of deck you're using. So if I look at the columns, I get the 4 of coins reversed, the 3 of wands, the 3 of coins reversed. So again, I have an interesting combination of there being a practical upheaval. You know what I mean? Something about this person's life is stunted or stuck. Growth is potential for growth is there, and the passion is certainly there, but like the refusal to grow and the refusal to kind of break through old passions, old systems is like trapping this 3. It's trapping this creative growth. So these two things are trapping this here, sort of strangulating it. The middle column, we have the 4 of wands upright, the ace of swords upright, and the knight of cups. Here's an interesting row because it's mostly pretty positive. So at least we know that we can kind of escape this trap. So our passion and the values that we've built around our work, the stability, has breakthrough underneath it and motion underneath it, but the motion is moving backwards. You know what I mean? So there's an interesting thing there. So the stability, again, feels like it's sort of trapping the breakthrough. If I partner these two, the 4 of wands and the knight of cups, are sort of, again, entrapping this. So this middle row in many ways is trapping is being trapped by the top and bottom. And then in this row, I've got 3 people reversed. So I've definitely got stunted evolution. I also may have people in my life who are bad influences and who may be enabling all of this. You know what I mean? So there may be a friend who, is sort of saying, you don't need to learn that. Or a boss who's saying, you don't need to know that. Don't worry about that. Just stick to the rules. So, this may be a sign to look for people in my life who are bad influences or who are keeping me stunted or who are enabling this blockage for me because it benefits them or they just don't want me to change or grow. So, anyway, as usual, this was a long video. The purpose of it was just exploring the way that I find reversals really useful in Marseille or pip decks in a way that I never really did with more Rider-Waite-Smith stuff. And I don't always do it, but more and more I am. So I just wanted to share that with you because, again, my whole process, as I've said, is it's about making my readings more practical and more useful. It's about making things, more colorful, to use a term, but not to the degree that they... the big criticism, and I've mentioned this before, of my reading style in the past is that it got so wrapped up in the psychological state that it was like therapy, but the thing is, like, to solve those problems, you need a therapist, not a tarot. I don't know. They just felt impractical to me. Like, you could identify the problem, but you couldn't figure out what to do about it. The journey has been like, here's how the problem is actually active in your life, and here are things that you can do around it. You know what I mean? So, again, the more information I have, the more information I can use. But if I'm right, and this person is a person who's doing a job that they've been doing for a long time, and their marriage to their own way of doing it is blocking a breakthrough, then, then that's a practical thing. And I can say, well, what are the things you do in your job that you're really sort of convinced are the right way? Think about that. As long as the person's willing to be honest about that, they can come up with an action plan around it. So it's still psychological. Like, the situation of this reading is still psychological, but it's not ephemeral. You know what I mean? You can sit down and think about, okay, well, when I work on this project, I refuse to get feedback, or I don't like feedback from this department. So that's the thing. You know what I mean? Anyway, my brain goes 100 miles an hour. So I hope this is interesting and useful. And yeah, have a good week. Bye.